Your home probably isn't as dirty as you think. It's just been taught the wrong habits. Most of us grow up believing that cleaning is something you do once things get bad enough. So we wait until Saturday, or until the kitchen finally feels impossible to ignore. Then we spend hours trying to put everything back in place. For a day or two, the house feels wonderful. Then life happens. Shoes come through the door. Mail lands on the counter. A coffee mug stays in the living room. One jacket ends up on a chair instead of a hanger. Nothing looks serious on its own, but little by little, the house quietly drifts away from order. So we clean again, and the cycle repeats. After a while, it's easy to believe the problem is a lack of discipline. But what if it isn't? What if the problem isn't the person living in the home, but the system the home has been following? This is one of the quiet lessons you can learn from many Japanese homes. Not that they're perfect, not that people there enjoy cleaning more than anyone else, but that small moments of maintenance are built into everyday life. Cleaning isn't treated as a weekend project. It's treated as part of finishing the moment you're already in. And that leads to one of the biggest mindset shifts in this entire video. Cleaning removes dirt. Resetting prevents disorder. Those sound similar, but they are completely different. Cleaning is washing the floor, scrubbing the shower, or removing grease from the stove. Resetting is much smaller. It's putting the room back into a calm, ready state before one small mess has the chance to become five. That's why the cleanest homes usually aren't the ones that get cleaned the most. They're the ones that rarely drift very far away from order. And almost every mess begins in one of only three ways. Something new comes into the house. Something gets used, but never fully finished. Or something never had a clear place to belong in the first place. The 6 habits you're about to learn quietly solve all 3. Some stop disorder before it enters. Some close the tiny open loops that slowly drain your attention, and some remove the daily decisions that allow clutter to grow without you even noticing. None of them require a free weekend. None of them require expensive storage systems. They simply teach your home how to return to order a little at a time. And the first one starts before you even walk through the front door. Let's begin with the simplest habit on the list. Take your shoes off at the door. You've probably heard this advice before. Most people assume it's about keeping the floors clean. But that's only part of the story. The real benefit begins long before you notice fewer footprints on the floor. Every time you walk through a parking lot, a grocery store, a sidewalk, or a public restroom, your shoes collect far more than dust. Tiny particles of dirt, oil, bacteria, pollen, and whatever the day leaves behind all travel home with you. Once those shoes cross your front door, every step spreads a little more of the outside world across the place where you eat, relax, and spend time with your family. Cleaning can remove those traces later, but preventing them from entering in the first place is almost always easier. That's why many Japanese homes begin with something called a genkan, a small entryway where outdoor shoes come off before anyone steps into the main living space. But the genkan is more than a place to leave your shoes. Think of it as an arrival system. Shoes go on the rack. Keys go into the tray. Your wallet has its place. Your bag has its hook. Mail has a basket before it ever reaches the kitchen counter. Nothing wanders into the house looking for somewhere to land. Everything arrives exactly where it belongs. Over time, this tiny routine does something unexpected. It doesn't just keep the house cleaner. It tells your brain that the outside world has ended and home has begun. Work stays outside. Errands stay outside. The rush of the day stays outside. Crossing the front door becomes more than entering a building. It becomes a small mental transition. Of course, not every Japanese home looks exactly like this. Some are large, some are tiny, and every family develops its own routines. The real lesson isn't copying one specific layout. It's creating a physical boundary that makes the next action almost automatic. Because the easier a habit is to begin, the more likely it is to happen every single day. One small habit at the door means less dirt to clean later, less clutter to deal with later, and fewer little decisions waiting for you when you walk in. Now that we've stopped bringing new mess into the house, the next question is just as important. What happens after we use something? Now that we've stopped bringing new mess into the house, let's talk about what happens after we use something. This habit sounds almost too simple. Clean as you go. Most people hear that and think it means cleaning the kitchen before bed. That's not what it means. It means finishing the small mess while it's still small. Wipe the stovetop after dinner, not tomorrow morning. Rinse the cutting board before food has time to dry. Put the knife back before reaching for dessert. Those little moments matter far more than they seem. Because every activity has a natural ending, most of us simply stop too soon. Here's a different way to think about it. Cooking isn't finished when dinner is served. It's finished when the stove is ready for tomorrow. Making coffee isn't finished when the cup is full. It's finished when the counter is clear again. Brushing your teeth isn't finished when the toothbrush goes back into the holder. It's finished when the sink is dry and ready for the next morning. These are what I like to call closing rituals. Tiny actions that quietly tell your brain, this task is complete. And that matters more than most people realize, because most mess isn't created while we're doing something. It's created during the 10 seconds after the activity ends. That's when the mug stays on the table. The towel gets left on the counter. The pan sits on the stove, just for now. Those 10 seconds slowly become tomorrow's clutter. There's another practical reason this habit works so well. Fresh messes are almost always easier to remove. A splash of pasta sauce wipes away in seconds while it's still wet. Wait until tomorrow, and it may need scrubbing. Soap rinses away easily before it dries. Grease comes off with far less effort before it hardens. The difference isn't your cleaning ability. It's timing. A few seconds now often save many minutes later. And over weeks and months, those minutes quietly add up. Instead of spending an entire Saturday recovering your kitchen, you simply never let it drift that far in the first place. There is one place in the house where this habit matters even more than anywhere else: the sink. There is one place in the house where tiny habits create surprisingly big results: the sink. This habit takes about 4 seconds, not 4 minutes, not a deep clean. Just 4 seconds. Every time you finish washing your hands, brushing your teeth, or doing the dishes, take one dry cloth and wipe the sink before you walk away. That's it. At first, it feels almost too small to matter. Most people think, how could 4 seconds possibly change anything? The answer has very little to do with the sink itself. Every room has what designers sometimes call a visual anchor, the first place your eyes naturally settle. In the kitchen, it's often the sink. In the bathroom, it's usually the sink again. In the living room, it might be the coffee table. These are the places your brain checks first without you even realizing it. When that visual anchor feels calm and finished, the entire room feels calmer, even if everything else isn't perfect. A dry sink sends a quiet signal. This room is ready. This room is cared for. Nothing important has been left unfinished. That's why this habit works so well. Not because a spotless sink magically cleans the rest of the house, but because your brain quietly treats it as proof that the room is complete. Of course, drying the sink doesn't replace real cleaning. It doesn't remove soap scum. It doesn't disinfect surfaces. Deep cleaning still matters, but wiping the sink dry prevents dozens of tiny reminders that something still needs attention. Water spots, soap residue, drops around the faucet, small details that most people barely notice consciously, yet somehow make the room feel unfinished. 4 seconds closes that loop before it has a chance to grow. And over time, those tiny moments quietly change how your home feels every time you walk into the room. But even perfect little habits have a limit, because no matter how well you finish individual tasks, a home still needs one simple habit that brings everything back together at the end of the day. By now, we've talked about stopping mess before it enters your home and finishing small tasks before they have a chance to grow. But even the best daily habits can't keep a home feeling calm if nothing ever gets reset. That's where this habit comes in. Spend 10 minutes every evening putting your home back into a ready state. Not 30 minutes, not an hour, not until everything is perfect. Just 10 minutes. And when those 10 minutes are over, you're done. That time limit is part of what makes this habit work. Most people fall into one of two traps. They're either too tired to start, or they start, keep going, and accidentally turn a simple reset into another exhausting cleaning session. Eventually, the brain begins to associate evening tidying with hard work, and the habit quietly disappears. 10 minutes feels different. It's small enough that almost anyone can begin. It's short enough that you don't dread it. And it's consistent enough to become part of everyday life. If you're not sure where to start, keep the order simple. First, throw away any trash. Next, take care of the dishes. Then, clear the surfaces you see every day. Kitchen counters, the dining table, the coffee table. Finally, prepare one small thing for tomorrow. Lay out tomorrow's clothes. Set up the coffee maker. Pack your work bag. Or simply leave the kitchen ready for breakfast. You don't have to finish everything. You only have to make tomorrow a little easier than today. One thing that makes this habit even easier is attaching it to something you already do. Start the reset when your favorite evening song begins, or set a 10-minute timer after dinner. Our brains build habits faster when they happen after the same cue day after day. Eventually, you stop deciding to do the reset. The cue makes the decision for you. And here's the part I love most about this habit. You're not really cleaning for today's version of yourself. Today's work is already finished. You're preparing tomorrow's version of yourself to walk into a calmer home. It's a small act of kindness. From today's you to tomorrow's you. That feeling compounds in ways you don't notice at first. Mornings become quieter. You spend less time looking for things, and the house stops asking for your attention the moment you wake up. Now we've dealt with dirt. We've dealt with unfinished tasks. Next, let's solve the biggest source of clutter. Not dirt, objects. We've talked about keeping dirt out. We've talked about finishing small tasks before they become big ones. Now, let's look at the biggest source of everyday clutter. Objects with nowhere to belong. This habit is simple. Every object in your home should have one specific home, not a general area, not somewhere in the kitchen, not, I'll put it away later. One shelf, one drawer, one hook, one basket, the same place, every single time. At first, this sounds like a rule about organization. It's actually a way to eliminate hundreds of tiny decisions. Think about how many times you've picked something up and wondered, where should this go? That question may only take a few seconds. But your brain answers hundreds of little questions like that every day. By evening, those decisions become surprisingly exhausting. Psychologists call this decision fatigue. The more decisions we make, the more likely we are to choose the easiest option instead of the best one. That's how a jacket ends up on a chair. Keys stay on the counter. Mail collects in a pile. Not because we're lazy, because I'll deal with it later feels easier than making one more decision. That's why the best home for an object isn't always the prettiest place. It's the place that's easiest to return it to. If putting something away requires opening 2 cabinets, moving another object, and reaching for a storage box, most people simply won't do it. Instead, store things where they naturally finish being used. Keep the scissors near the drawer where you open packages. Keep reusable shopping bags near the door. Keep charging cables where you usually sit, not where they look nicest. The easier it is to put something back, the more likely it actually goes back. There is one important exception, though. Sometimes an object doesn't have a home because the real problem isn't organization. The real problem is that there's simply too much. No storage system can permanently organize more than your home has room to hold. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for your space is not buy another organizer. It's own a little less. Because clutter usually isn't caused by laziness. It's caused by too many tiny decisions competing for your attention every single day. Give every object one clear home, and most of those decisions simply disappear. But even the best system can still fall apart. And the reason has nothing to do with your house. We've talked about keeping dirt out, finishing small tasks, resetting the house each evening, giving every object a home. Those habits work, but there's one reason people still give up. And it has nothing to do with the house. It has to do with the standard they've set for themselves. Most of us carry around an invisible picture of what a clean home is supposed to look like. Perfect kitchen, perfect bathroom, perfect floors, perfect countertops. If we can't reach that picture today, we convince ourselves it's not worth doing anything at all. That's the trap. Because perfection quietly becomes the enemy of consistency. The Japanese approach is often much gentler. Instead of asking, "Can I finish everything today?" it asks, "What's the smallest step that keeps the habit alive?" Done is better than perfect. Consistency is better than intensity. One small action today is worth more than one perfect cleaning day you never quite get around to. Here's a simple way to think about it. Imagine your home has 3 levels of maintenance. The first is the 1-minute reset. Throw away the trash. Put one object back. Wipe one surface. If that's all you can do today, that's enough to keep the habit alive. The second is your 10-minute evening reset. The routine we've already talked about. Return the house to a calm, ready state before tomorrow begins. The third is weekly maintenance. Vacuuming, cleaning the bathroom, changing towels. The deeper cleaning that every home still needs from time to time. Each level has a different purpose, and each one counts. Of course, lowering the threshold doesn't mean lowering your standards for hygiene or safety. Food still needs to be stored properly. Bathrooms still need regular cleaning. The goal isn't to ignore important work. The goal is to make starting so easy that you almost never choose to do nothing, because that's where real consistency comes from. Consistency doesn't mean never missing a day. Life happens. Trips happen. Busy weeks happen. Consistency means never letting one missed day quietly become a new habit. Miss today, come back tomorrow, that's enough. Over months and years, those ordinary returns matter far more than short bursts of perfection. A calm home isn't built in one extraordinary weekend. It's built through hundreds of ordinary days, one small action at a time. Now, step back for a moment, because this was never really about 6 separate cleaning habits. It was about one simple system. Each habit solves a different problem. Together, they quietly support one another. The first habit keeps new mess from entering your home. The second finishes each activity before it has a chance to leave a trail behind. The third creates a feeling of calm by keeping the room's visual anchor complete. The fourth gives your home a fresh starting point every evening. The fifth removes hundreds of tiny decisions that slowly turn into clutter. And the sixth makes the whole system sustainable by replacing perfection with consistency. Notice what these habits have in common. None of them ask you to work harder. None of them require more motivation. They simply remove small problems before they have time to become large ones. That's the real difference. Your home doesn't stay clean because you clean more. It stays clean because fewer problems survive until tomorrow. And that's what many Japanese homes quietly understand. A peaceful home isn't created by occasional heroic effort. It's created by ordinary actions, repeated so consistently that disorder never has much of a chance to grow. That's how a house begins to feel lighter. Not because you're constantly cleaning it, but because you're no longer constantly rescuing it. Before you try to change your entire home, I'd like to suggest something much smaller. Don't start all 6 habits tonight. Just run a simple 3-night experiment. On the first night, leave your shoes at the door every single time you come home. Notice how different the entrance feels by the end of the day. On the second night, keep one dry cloth beside the sink. Every time you use it, take 4 seconds and wipe it dry before you walk away. Nothing more. On the third night, set a timer for 10 minutes. Reset the house. Throw away the trash. Clear the dishes. Put a few things back where they belong. Then stop. Even if the house isn't perfect, that's the experiment, not perfection. Just 3 small changes. As you go through those 3 evenings, pay attention to something most people never measure. Did you spend less time looking for things? Did your morning feel a little quieter? Did your home ask for less of your attention the moment you walked into it? Those are the changes that matter. Because a peaceful home isn't measured by how impressive it looks. It's measured by how little energy it quietly asks from you each day. If you notice even one of those changes, then the system is already working. And that's exactly how lasting habits begin. Not with a dramatic transformation, but with one small success that's easy enough to repeat tomorrow. Before we finish, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. At the beginning of this video, I said something that may have sounded a little strange. Your home probably isn't dirty. It's simply been trained in the wrong direction. Every habit we've talked about today is really just a way of teaching it something different. Not through more effort, not through longer cleaning sessions, but through small actions repeated often enough that they eventually become automatic. Because that's how peaceful homes are built, not all at once. One ordinary moment at a time. And maybe that's the biggest lesson hidden inside many Japanese homes. A calm home isn't something you achieve. It's something you quietly maintain. You don't wake up one day and suddenly become an organized person. You simply make today's mess a little smaller than yesterday's. Then you do it again tomorrow. Over time, something interesting begins to happen. Your mornings feel lighter. You spend less time looking for things. Your home asks less from your attention. And without realizing it, your life begins to feel a little quieter too. Because in the end, a clean home isn't a home where nobody makes a mess. It's a home where every mess has a short life. So, before you leave, I'd love to ask you one question. Out of everything we talked about today, which habit could you honestly see yourself trying tonight? Let me know in the comments. I'd genuinely love to hear your answer. And if this video helped you look at your home a little differently, I think you'll enjoy what's coming next. In the next video, we'll explore why so many Japanese homes feel far larger than they actually are. The surprising part is, it has almost nothing to do with square footage. It has everything to do with the way the space quietly guides your attention. Until then, thank you for spending a little time with me today. Take good care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.